Welcome to At Home with Music. I'm Leon Olguin, and I thought I'd come out here and try to get some of these beautiful fall colors into my latest video. Weather's getting a little bit cold here, so I'm putting on the flannel, trying to keep warm. Anyway, the subject of this video is my top 10 composers. Now, if you go around YouTube, you can find a lot of videos, the top 10 classical composers, the top 5, whatever. This top 10 list is a little bit different because it is purely subjective. These are the 10 composers that I find myself listening to the most as of now, which is, as I'm recording this, it's October 2022, as you can see by the fall colors behind me. So these are the composers that have captured my attention. So this top 10 list may have some names on it that might seem a little strange to you. Anyway, I'm going to do this in 2 parts, and you'll be hearing some of the music in the background as I talk about these different composers. And really what I'm going to be doing here is just explaining what it is about these particular composers that has drawn me to their music at this particular time. Now, later on, there will be other composers, no doubt, that grab my attention. But these are the 5, I should say these are the 10. I'm going to do them in 2 sets of 5 here so that these videos don't get too long. These are the 5 that have been grabbing my attention for various reasons. And so I'll try my best to explain what those reasons are. I'm not using a script or anything, just what I happen to be feeling about these guys right now. So number 10 on my list is Claude Debussy. I've talked about him in my From Medieval to Modern series when we talked about the Impressionists, the Impressionism movement in music. And Debussy holds a special place in my heart because one of the pieces that I learned was arabesque. An arabesque of his, and I can still play it to this day. I also learned the Children's Suite, which is what you're hearing in the background. And I learned to play the whole thing. It was one of the first multi-movement suites, if you like, that I learned way back when I was maybe 13, 14 years old. And I still enjoy listening to those. A big favorite of everybody's when I would play the piano was they wanted to hear the Gollywog's Cakewalk, or they wanted to hear this particular piece that's playing in the background, which he's trying to emulate like a piano exercise, where you're just moving your fingers and trying to gain dexterity and virtuosity on the piano. So number 10, Claude Debussy. His music has been described as delicate, ethereal, atmospheric, just plain beautiful stuff. Number 9, Franz Liszt. There's a composer that I would like to talk a little bit more about, maybe devote an entire video to him. He is a fascinating fellow because he has been referred to as the first rock star. He was the first musician to do a solo recital on the piano without any other musicians involved, which was considered a very arrogant thing to do at the time. He was also one of the first to play music from memory. He'd sit down at the piano, do a whole concert by himself, not using any music. And that was also considered the height of arrogance at the time. All performers read from the sheet music. And in fact, that tradition for many pianists continued on even into the 20th century. The piece that you're hearing is from his later period. Everybody knows a lot of Liszt's works from his middle years, or when he was really famous. He was writing a lot of show pieces for himself because he was a brilliant technician at the piano. He could play anything. But these later works of Liszt are dark, mysterious, atonal, which means you can't tell what key they're in. And this is one of my favorites, talking about the gray clouds moving across the sky. It's almost kind of a scary thing to listen to, and it's very futuristic. Nobody was writing stuff like this at the time except Franz Liszt, a fascinating composer, very prolific, just an amazing person to study. I have whole books in my personal library devoted to the life and work of Franz Liszt. Number 3 is one that perhaps many of you have never heard of, and it's a fellow by the name of Carlo Gesualdo. And he's another one that perhaps I will devote an entire video to, because his life story, which I'm not going to really get into in this video, is pretty fascinating, very dramatic. Somebody should make a movie about this guy. But he is an early composer, and his music is also very, very futuristic. And I'm playing in the background now a piece called Morro, Lasso. And the music is very chromatic, which means it shifts around from different keys almost randomly, way, way ahead of its time. So that's somebody that I will be talking about more in the future. Number 7 on my list is the Russian composer Peter Tchaikovsky. And what you're hearing now is probably one of the most famous piano concertos ever written. Piano Concerto Number 1 in B-flat minor. When I used to listen to the classical station when I was growing up, they would have, like a Sunday night concert, and the closing music would be the slow movement from this piano concerto. Now we're hearing the first movement, which is very triumphant sounding, beautiful, beautiful melody. So Tchaikovsky, another composer that we'll study more in the future. Very interesting life, very sad life in some regards, but certainly one of the greatest composers of all time. I actually played some of his piano pieces, and the interesting thing about Tchaikovsky's piano music, he was not really a great piano player, and so sometimes his piano music can be a little bit awkward to play, but nonetheless, still very beautiful, very much worth pursuing. The last composer I want to talk about in this particular video, he's number 6 on my list of composers that have caught my attention, and that is Kapustin, Nikolai Kapustin, another Russian composer, incidentally. He is probably one that you've not heard of, but what is really interesting about his music is that it's a combination of romantic music, but it's also got a lot of jazz influence in it. And even though it's not improvisational by nature, when you play Kapustin, you're not making it up as you go along. You're reading the notes just like you would for any classical piece. But there's definitely some jazz chords in there, some jazz progressions, and it's almost like frozen improvisation. The lines sound like something that a jazz musician would make up as he was playing and improvising, but they're written down, and so the classical pianist approaches it and plays exactly what's written. And it's interesting, if you listen to a lot of different interpretations of his music, some of them play it too stiffly, and it doesn't swing like jazz really should. So there are some pianists that take a looser approach to his music, and it just sounds more jazzy. So it's an interesting thing. His music is endlessly fascinating. It just shifts from key to keys just so quickly, but yet so smoothly. An interesting thing about him is that he also was the performer of many of his works, so he is also quite a phenomenal piano player. But also, because he was a pianist, his works lie under the fingers. It's like I was saying that Tchaikovsky's piano music is a little awkward to play because he was not really a great piano player. Kapustin, because he was a great piano player, his music is what they call very pianistic. It lies under the fingers, and it's easier to play, relatively speaking. It's still very difficult music, but pianists find it more comfortable. I think that's the best way to describe it. It's more comfortable for your fingers, but it feels more natural. But yet it is still very interesting music, and I think you will enjoy it. So we'll talk a little bit more about him as well. So that's it for this video. We're going to get into numbers 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, and there it won't be quite as surprising. I think you'll recognize every name on the list as I go through the top five, the second group of five of my top 10 composers. Anyway, thanks for watching and for listening to me ramble on about these different things. We're just kind of skimming across the surface when we talk about these different composers. And we'll be coming back and doing some more in-depth studies on some of these guys and their work. And I think you'll find that quite interesting. So once again, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you'd like to support my work further, you can go to my Patreon page. I will leave the link below. You can also go to my website and sign up for just to contact me and be on our newsletter, emailing list, and so on. So anyway, thanks again, and I'll talk to you in the next one.